Hello, YouTube. So today I want to talk about Bun, the Node.js alternative that recently did something with LLMs. More on that later. Before that, just a minor life update to explain why it's been over 2 months since I last put up a video. I am on paternity leave, which means that my family grew recently. This is our second, so they are not quite as chaotic as the first child's newborn stage was, but it still takes a lot of time doing the housework and entertaining the older child and all that stuff. Plus, I started playing Final Fantasy 14 again, so that's been non-trivial amount of my taken of my daily allotment of fun time, which is 1 to 2 hours maybe. Also, that's why I'm kind of speaking a little quiet. But anyway, so Bun. So something like 3 weeks ago, the lead dev of Bun, Jared, put up this gnarly merge request to rewrite the entire project in Rust in one fell swoop that adds 1,009,000 lines of code across 6,700 commits, which is roughly 6,500 more than GitHub even shows in the web interface. And so, as I mentioned in the beginning and alluded to in the title, this was admittedly done largely with the help of LLMs, which is gross. And as this was getting attention on the usual forums, such as like Hacker News and Reddit and stuff, Jared commented on the Hacker News thread that this branch was more or less an experiment, probably wouldn't even be merged, and some other things to kind of put people's minds at ease. And then a little over a week after that, the MR was merged. So what happened? So before I get into what I think, kind of my conclusion, here are some facts that I believe to be relevant to the context. So first, Bun was acquired by Anthropic in December of 2025. 6 months ago. Anthropic has a couple of prior case studies of large-scale software projects written entirely by their language models, the Claude series. There was a C compiler in February that used a GCC test suite, but it lacks an assembler and linker, so it's not really a GCC replacement. It also makes less efficient code with all of its optimizations than GCC does with no optimizations. So it is a bad replacement for part of GCC. And then also less explicitly, kind of like a case study, but Claude Code is supposedly a heavily dog-fooded, thing, and that's kind of their like main thing for developers. I have no idea how I would acquire evidence to disprove that it is dog-fooded, so we're just going to take it on face value that it is indeed written primarily with Claude. Next fact, Anthropic is preparing to IPO sometime this year in the fall, and they need all of the storytelling assistance they can get, given that the entire LLM industry is just lighting VC money on fire. We'll see how that goes. Some other facts. Bun, these are more Bun-specific facts. Bun tried to contribute to the Zig compiler, but the timing and quality of their attempt was poor because Zig had already released a better version of their contribution. I have a link in the description to kind of like one of the Zig developers, kind of comments on it, but more or less like they're in the for the incremental update case, the Bun version gave a 4x speed improvement, whereas the Zig version, or the Zig form of their the Zig form of this thing resulted in 300 times faster. So something like, what is that, like 75x faster in the official Zig version. Anyway, and then also Bun's lead developer, Jared, has stated that he thinks the future of open source is the inverse of Zig's LLM ban. If you didn't know, the Zig project has banned all LLM contributions, and Jared thinks that the future of open source is kind of the inverse of that, where human contributions will be banned and only LLMs will be allowed to write code for open source, which is insane. But anyway, so with all of that, and then given the events that occurred, what stories can we glean from this whole thing? For the LLM boosters, of course, they can just trust that Claude Opus 420.69 Max Superthinking Omni Sun Eater could spit out 1 million lines of code without a problem. Pure upside. Rust is a memory safe language, so see you later to all of those bugs. Rust doesn't yet have an LLM policy, to my knowledge, and even if they do decide on one, will they decide on one? Who knows? They probably wouldn't have a complete LLM contribution ban, if I had to guess. So the need to deal with any built-in hostility from the ecosystem is kind of not there at this moment. Could be there in the future. Who knows? But so that's like the pure positive approach of it. For the LLM haters, or the folks who believe in things such as a project community, the merits of understanding a code base, production software rewrites are a bad thing to YOLO, trusted maintainers, and all of these other things that LLM boosters never really give a shit about because they haven't read enough books or listened to enough Midwest emo. The whole thing's kind of insane on its face, regardless of the language that regardless of the languages under question. So first of all, like the project community, Bun has had 5 years of history as a Zig project, and now anyone who contributed previously and wants to continue has to learn a new language, or they have to already know Rust. And sure, they're both systems languages that have a fair amount of overlap, but they're still extremely different languages with different idioms, different patterns, different syntax, different standard libraries, different libraries available in the ecosystem. So, they're not replacements for each other. And so the pool of contributors is going to see a massive drop without any question. That's assuming, of course, that anyone wants to try and contribute to a project that might just do this again and lock them out of contributing. Like, why would you do that? So then next, who is going to understand the new million lines of code and growing? Like, clearly no one human has, well, no, okay. The LLMs do not have understanding, right? They do not have memory. They do not have, cognition. They cannot understand the code base. And now there are no humans that understand the code base. So no one understands the code base. For one thing, it's not like the LLM can just endlessly add code and still maintain the same expertise as a 5-year veteran of a project is going to. There are no veterans anymore. This project has just been reset. And you can't even reliably ask a maintainer where you would begin with adding a feature because Zig Bun expertise means nothing now. They're probably just going to ask an LLM. And if I want to do that, I would just do it myself. I don't need a maintainer to act as a proxy to an LLM. What are we doing here? And to be clear, I don't know if that's happened yet, but it is, it doesn't seem far away from where we are now. So anyway, next point. Full software rewrites are just kind of a bad thing to YOLO. I've been around a while. I have 13 years of on my resume. I've been programming for longer than that. And I've read a lot of the blog posts and the articles and the books and stuff that talk about what happens when you do full software rewrites. And generally, you write a blog post about how it was a terrible idea, and all of the things that went wrong with it. So generally, you can do things like gradual migrations, which admittedly is not as simple when developing a runtime like Bun and Node.js are as it would be developing web services, but it is doable. It's more responsible. You can have side-by-side versions that are running or that are both available during in a transition period, which is kind of what they are doing, sort of. But they've also said that the next minor version of Zig of Bun is going to be the Rust version. So it's not really running them side by side. And also it would be a nightmare to manage this, having two streams, the two simultaneous code bases, and two releases and all that stuff. And also getting people to use the new one is a real challenge, because they're going to want to use the one that is, tested and that's been in production and people have used and stuff. So getting people to use the alternative form, or the transitionary one is that's a challenge. But it's got to be better than a 1,000,000-line PR, right? Anyway. So then, then also this is all just totally dumped on anyone's ability to trust the maintainers. In Jared's damage control posts, he was talking about how the initial criticisms were an overreaction. The branch was an experiment. Maybe that was true, but it's really hard to reconcile that with the fact that it was merged 9 days later. I don't know. It's hard to accept the both the branch was an experiment and that everyone was overreacting, and then 9 days later supposedly it's not an experiment anymore. And I understand that he did also say that it was a low percentage chance that it was going to be merged, and that maybe we just hit the low percentage chance. But also I don't know, I feel like it wouldn't have been quite as contentious if it was actually if that was the original intent of the branch, you know. And again, like you can't even reliably ask maintainers questions about the code anymore, so you can't really trust what they have to say about the code, because no one understands a million lines of code within, you know, it's been like a month now. No one understands the entire code base anymore. So like, and also they've been continually making changes since then. So you know, all that said, you know, I've made my points why I think it was not a good engineering decision, why it was not a good product decision, why it was not a good, you know, community decision. I think this was a decision that was not intended as one of those, an engineering product or community decision. I think it was a marketing decision. And the reason is that this can be a second Claude case study that they can blog about. And it, you know, there's a lot of things about it that you can just de-emphasize if you're writing the blog post, you know. You know, writing an article called Claude Rewrites Major Open Source Project from Zig to Rust in 9 days, that's pretty good half truth to put in front of the world, and you don't have to talk about all of the second order effects, you know, community destruction, comprehension destruction, trust erosion, the product velocity that's going to be mired down in slop now, the fact that no one understands the code base anymore, you know, all of this stuff. You know, I don't know, who knows, maybe they have the right idea. Humans aren't necessary for software development anymore. LML. Anyway, as I was writing this, I found out that I'm not the only person who's talked about this being a marketing stunt. So I've got a link to someone blogging about it in the description, which I think is, you know, good. It's good validation. You know, I'm not just a, you know, guy off in the corner screaming myself. Anyway, I just wanted to rant. So, and also it's, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to rant. So that's all for today. Let me know what your favorite marketing move is in the comments. Personally, I'm a big fan of KFC Japan gaslighting the entire country into eating KFC for Christmas, but I'd like to hear your favorites. So, yeah, that's it. Have a good one. So, I recorded all of the previous part of this video, whichever direction that is, 2 days ago. And it looks like today we've got a new blog post from Claude, from Anthropic, about Claude Code, introducing this new feature called dynamic workflows. And in it is a section called Rewriting Bun with Dynamic Workflows. It says an example of what dynamic workflows can unlock at scale is the recent rewrite of Bun. Jared Sumner used dynamic workflows to port Bun from Zig to Rust with 99.8% of the existing test suite passing, roughly 750,000 lines of Rust, and 11 days for first commit to merge. One workflow mapped the Rust lifetime for every struct field in the Zig codebase. The next wrote every .rs file as a behavior identical port of its .zig counterpart. Hundreds of agents working in parallel with 2 reviews on each file. Blah, 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 blah. Notice there's nothing in this about what happens to the community of maintainers, what happens to the, you know, the ability to trust the maintainers, nothing about the code base's maintainability, nothing about does anyone understand the code base. None of that's in here. So, you know, just saying. Yeah. What do you think about this? Because I think yeah. Anyway, have a good one.